Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are very privileged to be having a conversation with Dr. Eve Meltzer, who's going to tell us a little bit about her journey as a pediatrician, who became interested in running for public office at the level of school board in her community. So I'm going to just give it over to Eve, and then maybe we'll ask some questions afterwards. And you all are welcome to actually drop questions on Facebook, and we can ask her the questions after she gives us a little bit of her background.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. So I think I'll just sort of go through my story of how I got to this place, because I never would have ever imagined myself running for school board or anything for that matter, just a few short years ago. So I think I'll just talk about how I kind of found myself here. So yeah, I mean, I've been a pediatrician for 22 years, right? I'm perfectly happy living in the suburbs with my family, living the dream, right? This is what I always dreamed of doing. But, you know, many of us women of a certain age and younger got very, very engaged, I think, with politics the last few years during the last administration. I think I'd always kind of gone along thinking that, you know, people who knew more than me were just taking care of things and making sure everything was, you know, going right. And everything seemed like it was going in the right direction in most aspects. So, I wasn't really, you know, I was interested in, you know, world affairs and politics, but never really, you know, I was honestly like ashamed to admit that I was the kind of voter that would vote for presidential elections. And I don't even think that I knew that that there was actually a state senate and a state assembly, you know, in New York. I thought there was like this governor who ran the show. Like I really was so not like engaged in let alone the school board. Like I don't even think that I voted. So I just I really kind of didn't. Yeah, I figured I was so busy as a physician, right? You know, we have these crazy busy lives and a family, and who has time for that, right? But I just found myself really just having to speak up about everything we were seeing. I guess you know, the first thing I think I found myself upset about was the Muslim ban, and I wrote an op-ed about that locally. And a few of my patients were like, "Wow, I saw what you wrote. Like that was amazing." And they were just like, "You know, we're so proud you're a pediatrician." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And then the attacks on the ACA, you know, began. And my husband's Canadian, and I felt so strongly, you know, that I was so great, you know, happy that we had that. And ultimately I would want us to have, um, Medicare for all, Medicaid for all. But you know, the fact that they were trying to attack what we already had with the ACA, and with millions of children losing healthcare around the country, really upset me. And I organized a bunch of rallies locally. I you know, joined a bunch of different local organizations that we all know popped up, you know, during the last administration. You know, a whole bunch, you know, Indivisible and a whole bunch of different organizations. And I found myself speaking out, organizing these rallies. And, you know, I didn't organize them initially, but people kind of reached out to me saying, well, you're interested in this and you're a physician. It'd be great if you spoke at this rally, or, you know, wrote a little something about this. And so, you know, people kind of looked to me, you know, for my voice as a physician. And I think that voice carries some weight, you know, in the community. And I got involved with, you know, more local grassroots organizations who'd been around for a long time. And, you know, they gave me their press list, you know, and I got like press contacts, and I learned how to write a press advisory and press release. And I guess I sort of had a knack for knowing what would attract people, and knowing, you know, what they might want to be interested in reading to get the press there. Because, you know, my you know, just organizing a rally isn't just for organizing a rally. I think it's just I wanted to increase community awareness about what was going on that people weren't paying attention to the last few years. And that was the point of organizing all these rallies, getting not even passerbys, you know, honking, but actually getting, you know, on the news, and having, you know, written reports about what was going on. And again, having my voice as a pediatrician, you know, quoted, I think was important, and local community members who joined us. So I can't even count the number of rallies that I've organized the last few years on a variety of issues. So, you know, the first issue that got me was the ACA, you know, the attacks on that. And then the Families Belong Together rallies, when they were separating, you know, children from their parents, back in 2018. I'd actually, well, going back around Charlottesville happened, I also formed a local organization, you know, Long Island Inclusive Communities Against Hate, and just brought, you know, community members of, you know, different backgrounds together just to learn more about each other, understand each other. And then when they started having the family separation issues, I joined like a organization called Families Belong Together. And later we changed our name to Immigrant Justice Now, because Family Belong Together, we found was another organization. But basically we organize these rallies like all over the country. And at one point I even reached out to the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they actually sent out an email with a link to find a rally near you, which is really, really cool of them, because they normally don't get very, politically engaged, but they actually sent an email to every member, just this is the link to find the rally near you, and hoping the pediatricians would show up. I mean, I never really saw a whole lot of physicians at our rallies, unfortunately. After a few of them, I really did, I found my my American Pediatrics chapter through all the work we've been doing. Another issue where I think I first reached out to them was on the gun safety legislation after Parkland. And I told them what I'd been engaged with. I reached out to them because what I came to realize was that everything that I was speaking out about, whether it was, gun violence or healthcare or the health of immigrant children, I would always, when they would ask me to speak, I would want to speak, factually, right? Because that's what doctors do. And I would go to the American Pediatrics website, and there would always be a policy statement or just something to guide me, and some references. And what I found was that everything that I was concerned about as an individual, they were concerned about. So it was kind of like coming home. I just, full circle, it was just sort of realizing that, the people that that I work with and that were my professional organization cared about the same things that I did. So that was pretty cool. And that led me to actually join and be more active in our American Academy of Pediatrics chapter, which I really hadn't been involved in since, residency, when, we would get like CME credits and stuff like that, go to the AP and get free pens and stuff like that, go to their yearly, conferences. But yeah, so I got involved with them and joined their legislative advocacy committee. Because I came to also see that a lot of the policies that affect healthcare are made by people who know nothing about health, who have no scientific background whatsoever. And, for example, in pediatrics, right, we check lead levels a couple of times before 2 years old. And a certain lead level, right, is going to trigger a visit to the home to look for the source of lead, right? Well, I just always thought, or something like that, or the fact that we give the meningitis shot at 11 years old, I just always assumed, or didn't really put much thought into it, that we did these things because that's what the American Academy of Pediatrics, thinks we should do. That's what, our professional organizations tell us we should do. That's why we do it. Never really clicked to me or occurred to me that these are actually laws, right? That compel physicians to do what they do, right? So I found that really interesting. So that just got me more and more interested in politics. So I would go on these legislative visits to, various, both at the state and federal level on various issues that impact children. And it was pretty cool. There's one bill that I was particularly interested as a pediatrician that we've been trying to push here in New York State, getting the flu vaccine in all children in daycare under 5, because as a pediatrician, I know that children between 6 months and between birth and 5 years are much more likely to get really, really sick if they get the flu, right? And even if they have the vaccine and they get the flu, they're 50% less likely to get really, really sick or be hospitalized or die, right? So, I know that, but these legislators in Albany, they don't know that, right? So they have people from the other side too that are fighting against what we want to do, particularly like I got very involved in vaccination, and the fact that we see all these outbreaks around the country, particularly measles. You'll remember from 2019, there was a huge measles outbreak across the country, and the epicenter was here in New York. Now, we've been trying to get the bill passed in New York State for a long time, way before I got involved in it, to remove the religious exemption to vaccination. That was part of what led to this outbreak and others across the country. And the measles outbreak, our legislative chair in Albany said, if we're not going to get this bill passed this year, we're never going to get it passed. So we have to really work on this. So I went like hardcore, like really, really worked hard to get this bill passed. And I used all the connections that I'd made in progressive groups on Facebook to get the word out about this, right? And, now we've obviously come to see the vaccination is, I guess it's kind of become a progressive issue, or at least a political one, unfortunately, where we really do see conservatives on the right not so much believing in vaccination and science in general, and people on the other side. But, in the progressive groups, you definitely will have some sort of crunchy granola people that don't believe in science or vaccines, So I had to sort of weed these people out. And when I would make these posts, I'd have some people, a minority, but, just throw out their crazy conspiracy theories. And so I would, always kind of matter of factly go back and forth with them. And then just on those Facebook pages, just according to people's likes and comments, I saw who could be an ally. And then I started private messaging them to, a call, explaining, giving them the science, giving them the facts, and then giving them contact numbers of these specific legislators they had to call and push so that this bill could get passed. Right. So just through social media, I was able to find allies and mobilize them and really get this bill passed, and which we ultimately did, which was amazing. And it was a really big accomplishment. And the anti-vaccine community, really, they know my name now because of it. And they've kind of stalked me ever since. And they actually had a rally outside my office. They actually flew in anti-vaccine people from California and had a rally outside my office where they're going out to my patients, holding their young babies, asking the parents if they vaccinate. And they left anti-vaccine literature all over every car in the parking lot. I was speaking at another event about immigrant children and family separation, and they found out about that. And they had a rally there, and
the same anti-vax group.
They're very, very, very big here on Long Island. There's a lot of anti-vaxxers. It's a very strong anti-vaccine community.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really bad. In fact, there was an NBC article I'll send you where they kind of I was actually in the same article as Peter Hotez, and it was really cool.
Wow.
But just talking about how these anti-vaxxers, stalk doctors basically who, speak truth in science, right? But they really, really do. It's bad. So I'll mention this because it's actually kind of melds into my school board campaign. But, so that was, I became legislative chair of our American Academy of Pediatrics chapter after that. And, just met with legislators about removing, e-cig flavors for children, vaping flavors that were really targeting our youth, like flavors like cotton candy and bubble yum and things like that. So, just a lot of good laws that I saw that as a pediatrician, I could really have a voice and help to move. Right. And then kind of COVID hit, right? And everything sort of became all about COVID. And then I found, myself doing a lot of webinars, as I'm sure a lot of you did, just educating, parents on Facebook and through op-eds. I've written a lot of op-eds over the years, but over the last year, they've mainly been focused on COVID. And what I found was, just having, becoming known in the community over the last few years from all the other stuff I did, I was recommended to be on our community task force, right? The reopening task force for school, right? And where they were trying to open our school safely. And so throughout the year, I had a lot of input on school board decisions. And I just found it really troubling, with this and as, so many other issues, that so many public health decisions that impact our children's health are made by school boards that, again, have no knowledge about healthcare or science or anything, or let alone public health, right? Their expertise is in education, mainly. The superintendents is not the school board. And these school boards, at least here in New York, have become very, very politicized, or at least here on Long Island. So you're leaving these decisions. Yeah, you're leaving these important decisions, like whether our children should wear masks in school, at the beginning of the year, to these highly politicized school boards who are going to just reflect the mood of the community and reflect whether they're on the right or the left. So, everything going on in our federal government goes right down to the school board, which is what I've come to understand. The other issue that's really, once I decided to enter the race, very close to I think it was just about a month or so before the race that I decided to run, because as physicians, we're obviously, like I said before, we're really, really busy, right? We have families, we're involved in lots of other issues. And school board's going to take, you're going to have a monthly meeting and probably, with public and lots of other meetings probably, and have to do, a lot more work than you're normally doing. And I'm already kind of maxed out, but I decided to go for it because I was already spending so much time volunteering,
Right.
myself all year. So I'm like, I just really felt that my voice was needed, as we, to make all these plans. And just, the beginning of the year, we, my chapter, we wrote these 10, myths about masks, right, to circulate to the community, and it was sent to all the superintendents across the school districts across Long Island. And then just this week, Zucker, the commissioner of health, announced, on Friday at 4 p.m., he announced that as of Monday, unless they heard from the CDC, because the CDC has so much time to respond to every, every state about it, they, unless we hear, it was like holding our children hostage. Unless we hear from you in 48 hours, we're going to not require children to wear masks in school, So,
Wow.
it was crazy. And so all the superintendents went like crazy. And then you saw the superintendents sending letters to their districts about, kind of reflecting where the politics of their communities stand, right? Where some were saying, on Monday, we're not going to have to wear masks, and others being more guarded, saying we're going to wait and see what happens, what the CDC says. It's ridiculous. And you had two school boards. Then finally, the Department of Education said, no, everybody has to wear masks. And then Cuomo came back yesterday and said, no, everybody has to wear masks. It's just so politicized. And it's really frustrating that that's how it's structured, right? That's just how it's structured, that instead of having objective people who are experts in public health, not appointed, just at a state, level, to offer this guidance based on levels in a community. Instead, these policies are set within each district by people who don't know what they're doing. So, that's why I really felt compelled to run for school board. Again, nothing I ever would have seen myself doing ever in a million years, but I just felt my voice was important now, just for our children's safety. And the other issue I was mentioning that's really come up after I actually decided to run for office is another sort of insidious thing that you might be hearing of going around the country. But there's everyone wants to now teach, progressives at least want to teach about systemic racism in our schools, right? And there's a big push against that. And I just think that the right has been really good about placing people from the school board level and then building up and sort of placing those seeds. And I think that we saw that over the last couple of decades, even that they were doing that while we weren't paying attention. And they're doing it now again with these school board elections, where they're really, really fighting what New York State mandated, that there be a diversity, equity, inclusiveness curriculum in our schools that would address systemic racism, and also just teach each other about our different cultures, our different religions, just to have everybody, all our diversity be embraced and taught about. So there's a really big push against that. And there was like in another district across Long Island, there was like a block of candidates who ran together on the same platform. And on their website, they literally had a picture with a quote by a guy, literally conflating the indoctrination of Hitler Youth with indoctrination of children with diversity, equity, inclusiveness education. They're obsessed with us teaching critical race theory, and when I went door to door,
which they can't ever define, right? They don't know what that even
is. Exactly. Right. But I went door to door, just knocking on homes just to give up my flyer and tell people about me the weekend before the election. And for most part, everyone was just like really nice, right? But there were a couple of people who were kind of old, and there was one guy who was like, well, why is everything in Spanish now? I never voted on that. Like, why are the things that we get in the mail translated in Spanish? I'm like, well, because some of the parents are Spanish speaking and they need to understand what's going on with their children as well. And then another guy who seemed really nice, he opened the door and he said, yeah, my wife used to be on the school board years ago. He's like, I have a question for you. What do you think about that critical race theory? And I'm just like, what? Like, watching a certain channel and getting, talking points from there, because where else is an 80-year-old man all of a sudden come up with that phrase? The last one was this older woman who was a former teacher, and she's like, oh, you're a pediatrician. Okay, that's good. And all of a sudden her face got all like twisted up, and she's just like, well, what about that 1619 project? Are you guys going to be teaching about that? And Yeah, so they're kind of obsessed with that right now, and it's getting a lot of airplay. So for me, as a pediatrician being on a school board, those will be like the two main focuses I have. Just you know, assuring from a science point of view that the health of our children is being looked after, right? And bringing it from a scientific point of view rather than an opinion. And then again, just our children suffer when they're not acknowledged, right? When the diversity isn't acknowledged, and their mental health suffers, right? And mental health obviously will be another issue because their mental health has really suffered this year because of the pandemic. But yeah, just this whole diversity, equity, the attacks on that is just something I feel strongly about fighting and really providing for our children, making sure that they get that kind of education. So, yeah, I mean, will it lead to other things? Now I have an interest in politics. We'll see. I mean, we'll start here. It's a good starting place just to see what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I just want to share with our audience that earlier before we hopped on to the live stream, we were talking about how physicians this year in particular, this past year in particular, because of the pandemic and like where we've found ourselves in terms of being kind of vulnerable because we've never learned how to do advocacy ourselves, right? For ourselves or for our patients, really. And so a lot of people are getting more interested in potentially running for office, which is a really great thing. Physicians, I think in particular, we're pretty type A. And we like to be told how to do something, and we like to kind of check those boxes and then to get it done, right? And politics do not necessarily work like that, right? You run, but you don't necessarily win, even if you do check all those boxes. And so it can be a challenge, and I think people are dissuaded often from running for higher level offices, particularly women in medicine, people of color in medicine, and actually outside of medicine as well. Women and people of color generally are running for lower level offices, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like if it's relevant to what your interests are, particularly at the time that you're interested in running, then absolutely you should run at that level. And I think that you're so well suited for like what you're going to be doing next, that is a great place for you to start. So I'm really excited about you being there and, taking care of the needs of the children in your community as a pediatrician who's been super, super visible as an advocate in so many different areas that impact upon the health and well-being of those children at the end of the day, of them and their families, right? Which are like things that are intimately interrelated. So yeah, we're very excited that you've won your race. I mean, incredible victory that you like stepped in so late and that you actually won the race. That's very unusual, just to let everyone else know. So if you're thinking about running for school board, don't do that in most circumstances. But that is really extraordinary that you're able to win that. And, we heard earlier that you're going to be there for a 3-year term starting in July. So plenty of time, hopefully, to make some really impactful change. And I think coming out of this pandemic too, there are real opportunities. Like we've suffered obviously very profound losses, and we've kind of understood that there are very broken systems that have been, brutally exposed during the pandemic. But I think in all of that, we also have a lot of opportunity now to like focus on issues that really have it's long overdue that we re-examine like what we've been doing in a lot of ways. And so I'm excited for you. I'm excited for, physicians in general. We are excited for physicians in general in this moment who are interested in running for public office. I didn't actually introduce Doctors in Politics at the beginning of this call because I was so excited to jump into the conversation with Dr. Krief. But very briefly, before we go to questions real quick, I wanted to mention that Doctors in Politics, for those of you who are not familiar, is a political action committee of physicians who came together a little over a year ago in the wake of the pandemic, who felt like we don't have a political voice, and that is likely why we have had such gross mismanagement of this pandemic and so much death and devastation in this country. And even prior to that, right, like there were physicians like Dr. Krief, not many of us, but there were physicians increasingly who were interested in what was going on in the world outside of medicine because we saw how it impacted our patients. And so we got involved in our communities at different levels, doing a lot of advocacy and activism. And, now I think is really the moment for physicians, because the rest of the world is now looking at us, because we have kind of been rendered, I think, kind of, for better or worse, heroes, right? Like coming out of this pandemic, hopefully we're on the way out. And we have an opportunity here to leverage that, I think, and to convince people that we belong in public office, where we can influence decisions on policies that impact health. And that's really all policy. Like in Doctors in Politics, we talk about how all policy is ultimately health policy, whether you're talking about education or housing, transportation, right? Like environment, all of these things. And it's become pretty self-evident during the pandemic how all of those things are actually related to our health and well-being. So we are excited for the moment. For physicians who are listening in right now or afterwards, if you're interested in running for office at any level, we have a small community of people who are candidates, former candidates, elected officials and former elected officials. They're physicians, progressive physicians, that we are growing, a community that we're growing. So, people to lean on if you're interested in running. If you're holding public office, then people to lean on as you're navigating that, because that comes with its own host of challenges. So yeah, again, we're super excited. Let me just go to the questions real quick, because we have a couple of questions here in the chat. The first is, can you discuss the intersection between healthcare and education in just a couple of minutes here, and then we'll go to the second question.
Yeah, so children can't learn when they're not in good health, right? Children can learn if they're hungry. Children can't learn if they don't have stable housing. Children can't learn if they're living in poverty. Like here in New York, because of the pandemic, we already had like 712,000 children living in poverty. And now the pandemic added an additional 325,000 children to that number. That's like a stunning number, considering we have like the second highest number of billionaires in New York State. It's just a staggering number. So all those children, they can't learn when they're living in poverty. It shouldn't necessarily just be up to community organizations to help support these children. It should really be supported in our schools. And again, what I spoke to earlier, the diversity, equity, inclusiveness, children who are singled out or feel isolated and alone, they're going to feel left out, and they're not going to be able to learn as well. And they're going to feel that their story is not being told. We have to tell all the children's stories, right? And all their cultures, their race, their religion's history, just so that they feel included in the community, and that their story is told. So everyone needs to be acknowledged, and everyone needs to have the resource that they need to be able to learn.
Excellent. Yeah, I completely agree with you. The other question that we have here is, what particular issues have you seen in your school district in particular that concern you as a physician? And is there anything that previous boards there have done that has been problematic?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously, not that much engaged with the school district decisions until the pandemic. Just a lot of the decisions that were made, they did an okay job. There were things that I recommended that weren't done that just seemed very, like easy decisions, and that didn't really follow the advice of the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Like, generally 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, right? They, that's when they start switching classes, right? But particularly in a lot of those classes, obviously when you get to high school, it's harder, but at least in the middle school, they don't necessarily, they all kind of move together, right? Or most of them are in the same classes. There's not a whole lot of variety of classes. So I thought it'd be a fairly simple thing to do, to just cohort those children, have the same groups of children, either stay in the same room or move together from class to class with that. But they just, despite my recommendation, they kind of intermixed all those children. They weren't cohorted, and that led to, increased need for quarantining with more children, potential exposures throughout the year. So, that was one thing that could have been done differently. We wanted, would have wanted more testing, just random testing, just to see what the levels were, within our schools. But there's a general belief around the country now, with studies showing that the levels in schools are generally lower than the community rates if things are done safely. I mean, I feel lucky just because I know around the country there have been schools that, haven't been masking and haven't been social distancing and have been doing far worse than we have here in New York State. But, there can always be improvements made, and, everyone should just try and really be creative and just think outside the box. And, I don't know that we did that quite enough in our district. And I just, want to have that vote so I can push for the things to be done even better, than they had been done.
Yes, well, we are excited to see what is coming next for you. And, as you start your term, if you're putting out information to your community, like, let us know so that we can share it also, since we do have actually school board members within our group in Doctors in Politics also. I think it would be great for you all to share ideas. We have this kind of thought in our head that it would be nice to connect everyone in the same way that, like, the people on the right are connected in terms of the legislation that they write. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense, for people who kind of share a worldview or share a perspective, for us to, like, have best practices. If something works in my community, it potentially can inform something that you could offer to your community as well. So I think that would be really great. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. We are excited, as I said, about your race and your win, and we're hoping that really great things come for your community, things that we can model across the country.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope the take home should be just for everybody to understand that as physicians, you really, really, really do have a very important voice, and people will look to you for your opinion, and you should use it, because we can really affect great change.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.